Hello everyone, welcome to this video and welcome to this channel. Hi, my name is Courtney if you have never met me before, and I live in the Jeonbuk region of South Korea, and I have been teaching here for about 8 months. So I am a first year EPIK teacher, but I wanted to make this video all about the documentation process and the timeline of applying for EPIK. I know lots of different YouTubers have done this, and I found that so helpful when I was actually going through the process because it can be really daunting when it comes to applying and trying to get a job in Korea. So anything that can be broken down by people who have done it before, I think is always helpful. So I just wanted to share my advice on it, having to do with my own personal story and how that played out in the application process, in the interview process, and then later on going to the visa. So I want to make this as quick, informative, and painless as possible for you guys to just get that information that you need. I do want to say that I'm wanting to make a separate video all about the lesson plan that's part of the application process. I just think that can be really detailed. I don't want to bore you with that right now. This is going to be more about the actual application itself, what you're sending in, getting to the interview process, and then if that's successful, going into the visa process, and then sending out finished documentation at the end. I also wanted to say before getting started, I was actually living abroad at the time that I decided to apply for EPIK. So I am American, but I moved abroad to Scotland to get my master's degree. So when I was in Scotland is when I decided to apply for EPIK. That made my documentation process quite a bit more difficult because I was already living internationally, so getting things like a background check was more difficult. I will be making a little caveat and telling you guys about that in the process, but if you're in the US or you're in your home country right now, all of this will pertain to you. I'll just add those little caveats because I didn't know anyone who applied to EPIK while still outside the country. So we have a lot to get through, so let's go ahead and get started. Stage 1, you should know that when you apply for EPIK, you can either go directly through the website or you can go through things like recruiters such as Corvia. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I did not end up going through a recruiter. I personally found the process, especially with different YouTube videos and blogs online, I don't want to say seamless to go through, but very easily done by yourself. I think if you want the extra confidence that a recruiter can give you, then that's great. I personally didn't go with that option and I didn't see any problems with it. I guess the pros and cons of the recruiter is that you do pay money for the recruiter, but of course they can help refine your application, and then even once you get to Korea, some recruiters will help you even in that process once EPIK leaves. So I applied for the fall 2023 intake and I applied in April of 2023. Something I want to say that I feel like isn't talked about enough is that it is not too late to apply. I think a lot of people discover EPIK and they think it's too late because they found it in April when everyone else submitted their applications February 1st when the application cycle opens up. You are not too late. I personally was in a waiting season where I was waiting to hear some responses for other opportunities, and then I went and I researched EPIK and thought that was a really great opportunity. It ended up being such a blessing and just woven really nicely with life. But don't think that you are out of the game if you are a little bit late in the process. There's nothing wrong with shooting your shot. You don't lose anything by applying. It is rigorous and you do want to be well informed for it, but don't let anyone tell you to count yourself out. You're the only one that can do it. But obviously starting as early as possible is a good idea because EPIK is a rolling application cycle where your applications will be submitted, reviewed, and either accepted or denied as they come in. It can be really great because you'll get earlier responses if you apply earlier, of course. Your likelihood of getting placed where you want to is higher if you apply earlier. But again, don't count yourself out if you're a little bit late to the game, but you're willing to have some flexibility of where you're placed in Korea. Definitely go for it. All right, so let's talk documents. On EPIK's website, there is an application guide and it's updated every single year, I believe. So right now there should be a fall 2024 guide that you would click on, and then it's going to have all the information listed out on a really big document. I highly recommend doing that. This is a process that's a bit tedious and detailed, and you want to make sure you account for that as you go through. So everything I say is an overview, but definitely do all your research into it, and there are documents specifically laid out for English speakers to be able to look through for this whole process on the EPIK website. So required documents when you submit your application. Number 1, you want a professional photo taken of you. So I just did this in my own room. It doesn't need to be something that you paid a lot of money for, but you do want to look professional. It's just a headshot and you will be submitting that and putting that on your application. Number 2, proof of a 100-hour plus TOEFL certificate, which TOEFL is teaching English as a foreign language. This is something that you you need. Unless you have an education degree as your bachelor's or master's degree, then there's going to be certain requirements that are going to be different for that. But otherwise, you will need a TEFL. So I believe mine was 120 hours. You can go up to 160, I believe. There's a lot of different levels. The benefit of that, and I do have good friends here who did get higher level of TEFL qualification, more hours. I think it's helpful depending on any type of future job you want to do. The more hours, the more credentials you basically get. But for EPIK, 120 hours was perfectly fine for me. So you can go in person for these TEFL courses or online. I think most people I know go online. I did too. I personally used Uni Prep Institute. It was a quicker way for me to be able to get the TEFL certificate. Like I said, I was getting my master's at the time, so I was trying to juggle that, walking into a dissertation, and then also trying to complete TEFL so that I could get to Korea on time. I was definitely going for that 120 hour and not anything more, just having to do with the amount of time I had, and that worked really well for me. But I'm sure there are plenty of other websites, I know that there are, that have great programs, so definitely look into it if you are wanting to do teaching as a foreign language, either permanently or just for an extended time. I do think the higher TEFL qualification you get, probably the better it is. You'll have more open opportunities in the future, whether you want to stay in Korea or move abroad even from there. So just keep that in mind, look at your goals, and then measure that up with your TEFL certification. I also want to mention TEFL courses go on sale all the time. So this is another good thing. If you are early on in the game, you can kind of watch those courses, those online courses, as they go on sale for Black Friday sales, and purchase it when the price is right instead of the timing's right, because you're ahead of the game. That could be beneficial. Otherwise though, definitely look up what a good price for a TEFL course is, and then again match it with the website or the organization you want to work with to be able to get it. Next, and number 3, do recommendation letters. Recommendation letters have very specific requirements and formatting that EPIK does put on their website. One of those requirements is having an actual ink signature. You're going to submit that with your physical paperwork at the end of the application process, which I'll be talking about later. But just note there's very specific requirements even within the document itself, making sure that whoever is writing you the letter, whether that's a previous employer or a teacher, whoever is writing that recommendation letter, they do have to reference teaching in Korea or EPIK. I'm not sure exactly which one, but there's very specific requirements. So please know that going into asking for the recommendation letters and receiving them back, to make sure there are things like the letterhead that's necessary and that everything's in order, so that you don't have to pester your recommenders for something not being correct in the first place, and instead putting something together formatting wise that makes it clear exactly what the expectations are for the letter that you're asking for and going to receive back. I personally had one professor that I was working with at the time who recommended me, and then I also had one previous employer from the other year that I worked with for over 2 years. So those were my 2 recommenders. One before was just the job that I was working in college. I did end up working with kids, having to do with summer camps and different art camps and stuff like that. That was interwoven in my main job, so I was able to pull from that, and so was my recommender from that experience. But like I said, I also had a college professor who worked more with the feedback I was able to give other students in the class, and didn't have to do with children at all. So just know that the recommenders, I would just make it as personalized as possible. Honestly, the people that you have a good relationship with, who can attest to your interpersonal communication skills as well, I think is really great. So you know the people that would make good recommendations. Next, and number 4, proof of English education. So there are certain countries that you're going to have to do this in. So for the US, your education is going to be in English, so you're not going to have to provide that proof, but just note if you are from a different country, and EPIK's going to ask for that verified. All right, deep breath. It's okay. We've reached the actual application itself on EPIK's website, and it's just going to ask for personal information first. This is going to be talking about citizenship, age, name, if you have Korean heritage. It will also go into contact information, talking about obviously phone numbers or email addresses. Something I found interesting that EPIK did ask about was time abroad. I did feel like this was something that was very strong in my application. While some people had a lot of education background, as I mentioned, I did not, but I tried to pull from that strength, which I'll talk about later in the video, but I really tried to pull at that for this job teaching abroad. Next, this is going to ask for a mailing address, and this is actually really important because once you do get accepted into EPIK, everything goes from online to print, so the mailing address is important. Then you are going to be asked for an emergency contact and then your education background. And this is going to be talking about everything from elementary school all the way up until your university degree, which maybe now is a good time to mention that you do need your bachelor's by the time you start your job working with EPIK. So what that means is that if you're applying in April, but you are still in your bachelor's degree, that is okay. You can apply. But by the time you start on August 25th or whatever that start date is, you will need to have your degree in hand and then do that to be able to have your visa. For me, as I said, getting my master's didn't really matter. I had my undergraduate degree and diploma, so that's all I needed. So anything past your bachelor's degree, you're not required to send in. It's no problem whether something is finished or not. But with your bachelor's, you either want to be able to have that finished or, again, that completion date already before your EPIK contract starts in August or February or whenever your start date is. Next, you're going to talk about your TEFL certification or if you have a valid teaching license. Then it will ask job-related questions. So this is about current employment, but also previous experience, especially having to do with education. So though I didn't have a job doing that, I also mentioned at some points of the application that I had tutored for 6 months kids for ESL in Spanish and English, but again, not employment, and my undergraduate degree was in social work. Next is the actual interview process with EPIK. Again, I want to make a separate video detailing my responses to it, but right now I'm gonna lay it out of what this actually looks like and the questions that they will most likely ask. These can range from person to person, of course, but it'll get you in the ballpark of what's going to be asked for you. So first up, the interview is going to be online or Zoom because of course you're most likely not living in Korea right now, and it's probably going to be around 30 minutes long. I think they say 40 minutes is the time you want to allot for it. Mine probably only ended up being maybe 20-25 minutes. It was pretty quick. So after I submitted my application and I was asked to interview, that was about 3 weeks later. EPIK will send dates and times that work for them. Please remember that this is going to be in the Korean time zone. So if you were in the States, you're probably going to be looking at maybe a 12 o'clock or 1 a.m. type of call. I was in the UK and I think I had a 7 or 8 a.m. call. So it really just depends on where you're at, but it will be scheduled around Korean time. First thing you want to think about, because this is an online interview, is that your lighting is okay, your Zoom function is working, everything is working properly, making sure that you are dressed adequately. I would dress just like I would for any interview. Maybe they just see the top half, but you might need to stand up midway. You never know what's going to happen. And I also think it just puts you in a headspace that you truly are in an interview, even if it is online. So I think just putting you in that headspace to be able to succeed in the interview, just being as prepared as professionally possible. At the beginning, they'll probably ask about the general application that you sent in, confirming that what you actually submitted is correct, probably going over contact information and things along those lines, just confirming what you have already submitted. Next, they're going to work their way into previous work experience. So I'm sure this ranges from person to person, especially if you have an education background. Once again, I did not, so I was just talking briefly about previous jobs and then how they would tie into EPIK. Something my interviewer asked as well was why specifically EPIK, why specifically Korea? And while I did anticipate this question, of course, and I had come up with several answers, by the time I got done finishing, I remember her being like, oh, that's really great. Like, you're talking about language, you're talking about culture. Okay, what else? I remember being like, I don't know. I listed 4 things. I was not expecting to really be pressed on that point even further. I thought having my 3 examples was good enough, but I think maybe because I had traveled some, she was really wanting to know about Korea. If you express how maybe you haven't lived anywhere else and Korea is the one, maybe you won't have that type of question. But for me, again, I had like pulled everything out of the hat. I thought like, I'm talking about language, I'm talking about culture, I'm talking about geography, I'm talking about history. And she was like, but what more? I was like, oh no. So just be as prepared as possible. This is not meant to scare you at all, but really know why EPIK and really know why Korea. Next, there is the demo lesson plan. So this is going to be about 2 minutes off camera. They're going to give you the subject and then the level of your students. So beginner or intermediate, and then they will give you a subject that they want you to teach on. So for me, mine just said, I'm going to give you the subject of colors. This is a beginner level. And then they let me turn off my camera, gave me 2 minutes to kind of construct a little demo lesson plan in my mind and what I was going to talk about. And then after 2 minutes, She flashed back on, said go, and then I had to teach that for 3 minutes. This was not something that she was responsive with, but I do think it's important to act like you are actually a teacher and that you are engaging with students, asking clarifying questions, making sure that you repeat things too or listen to what they're saying. You're affirming that what they're doing is correct. Like saying, oh, there's red and there's yellow and there's green. What other color is there? Blue. Very good job. Might be really awkward because, at least in my case, the interviewer did not engage at all and they do have their screen on. They're just kind of staring at you. I'm sure each interviewer might have maybe like a different way of doing it, but that was the case for mine. But you really just got to go with the flow, and then they'll cut you off at 3 minutes, and that's that. My advice here is just to have a couple materials on hand if you can. I was really thankful that I ended up getting color because I had a bunch of colorful sticky notes. So in my 3 minutes, I actually ended up going through with a Sharpie and a pencil and just writing the actual colors in the correct post-it notes. I was able to have a visual aid and be able to pull it up and go, this is blue, this is yellow. I'm not going to have any time to come up with a thoroughly well thought out lesson plan. So a lot of listen and repeat and engaging pronunciation, I think, is kind of the way to go with that. Obviously, take that as you will. That's just kind of how I thought about it and went about it. Lastly, the coordinator will go over any mistakes that they saw in your application, but they'll let you know any corrections, even having to do with contact information or citizenship or any of that. They'll just clarify that with you so that when you are notified of a successful interview, then you'll be able to move forward with the physical documents being corrected. And then they'll ask you if there are any questions. I always think it's helpful to at least be able to have one question. I think I was that person previously when they said any questions, I'd just go, no, I think that's it, which was not good. I think you want to show that you're interested, that you're engaged, that you're willing to learn. And there's a lot to learn before you live here and you're learning about the whole Korean education system. So maybe just coming up with one good question to be able to ask is helpful to show that you're engaged and genuinely interested and being able to further your knowledge. So then there are the EPIK interview questions. Again, I will be making a separate video on that, talking about the questions themselves and then also my responses to them. If you guys are interested, definitely let me know so that I know that's something that you want, and then also including interview tips in that as well. And then you have ended your interview, you hop off of Zoom, you breathe a massive sigh of relief, and you hope that you get accepted. And if you don't, it's okay, you can apply again. It's no big deal. And if you do, then that's really exciting and great. You move on to your next stage. So for me, EPIK notified me a few days later about a successful application. I'm sure if you apply in February or March, that's going to be different than May or June of when you hear back. This one is document submission and review. So EPIK is going to want all of your documents sent physically to their office. So first, they are going to want a hard copy of your application, ink signed and updates from the interviewer included in it. So you're just going to print off your actual application itself with any corrections and make sure everything is signed accordingly in ink. Next, you're going to want a color copy of your passport page, then a professional photo. After that, an apostilled criminal background check, which this means with the US that this is going to come from the FBI. So this is going to be different, of course, depending on what country you live in. This is something I wanted to mention because I was living abroad, was not easy for me. I think for most people living in the States, you can even go to a police station to be able to get these, and it should be pretty quick and seamless. For me, I could not show up to the police station in the UK. I was not a UK citizen. So I needed to be able to physically send my fingerprints to the FBI. I actually went and I had to buy a fingerprint kit, and I got it from Amazon. So I had the ink pad itself and then also the little fingerprint box that you just go through and you put all your fingerprints in. And then I had to physically ship that from the UK to the US to the FBI for them to be able to process all of my fingerprints internationally. And it lasted, I think, over a month and a half before I got a response back. So that's something you should know. If you are living internationally, you do need a background check, and it does have to be recent. So that is something I really struggled with time-wise. If you are in the US, you're not going to have to worry about that. Just know that does have to be apostilled. Then you're going to need a copy of an apostilled bachelor's degree. I personally went through Monument Visa. This was also a referral. I believe the YouTuber's name is Carla. She made a really informative, fantastic video, and she was talking about Monument visa and how she used that. I'm not sure if it's the most cost effective. I think that it was, but it was also just the quickest and easiest for me. So I ended up going through them to get everything apostilled. There is a service fee that you're going to have to pay for that, and it will take 6 to 8 weeks to be able to process. For me, I believe it was 7 or 8 weeks. It took a very long time to be able to get everything apostilled. So just know that you want to send that in as absolute soon as possible. Once these things are mailed to you, then you mail all of this to EPIK. So once you get your apostilled certifications back, all of that, you're going to compile it in the correct order. This is going to be stated on the documents EPIK sends you. And then you're going to put it all together. You're going to bring it to UPS and you're going to ship it to Korea. Again, a bit of a hefty fee because you are shipping paperwork that has to do with confidential information to a different country. I did end up paying for priority, I believe. For me, that was worth it because I was running thin on time by that point, but depending on where you're at the process, you can wait it out. Just remember also in that signed envelope with everything apostilled, you're also going to want a sealed transcript from your university, 2 letters of rec that are signed in ink, a copy of your TEFL certification, and a photocopy of all those documents. So you're gonna have 2 separate stacks of the same papers. Then EPIK notifies you when they have received your documents, and you will wait to see if you have successfully secured a position, and then they will inform you of your placement in the region that you will be going to. Congratulations, you have made it to the end. That's it, you got the job. It seems all grand and dandy and nice, and then you realize that you have to fill out a visa form. I have a very funny backstory that I'm not going to go into too much detail about, but I did have one of those horror stories for applying for my visa in the UK. When I was in the US, I applied for a visa in the UK and waited months to hear back for a student visa. I ended up not receiving it by the time I had to leave, and so I had to wait and wait. I had to call the embassy. The embassy charged me for every single minute I was on the phone. I ended up having to cancel a flight for it. It was just a nightmare situation of a visa. Again, it took months to be able to process. I was very worried about that coming in because I thought, well, if it's the UK, then maybe it's just every country. And that's not true. At least for me, Korea was very easy and seamless. I ended up getting my visa given to me within 2 weeks. Sorry guys, I think that I got cut off because my storage is about to run out. So I'm just gonna run through this really quick. I'm sorry about that. But for the visa process, you are going to need the 13-page document that EPIK sends you, a notice of appointment, which is also given to you by EPIK, completed visa form that can be found on the website, a notarized copy of your passport information page, $45 for the actual cost of the processing, 2 passport size photos that you can take at something like a CVS or Walgreens, and you probably want to keep additional copies for yourself when you come to Korea. And for me, this came back in about 2 weeks, like I said, and then I was able to book a flight from there. So again, sorry to wrap this video up so quickly, but I hope that you guys enjoyed. I hope that this was helpful. If you have any other questions, definitely look towards my next videos for what I will hopefully make detailing all of this. But also if you have specific ones, definitely make sure to leave a comment down below as well. I would love to do a Q&A type of video to answer your niche questions. I might not be able to get to all of the comments, but if you leave them, I'd love to answer them in a future upcoming video. But thank you guys so much for watching. My encouragement for right now is that you can do this. I know it sounds daunting, but if this is something you are passionate about, just know I believe in you. I believe you can do this. Believe in yourself. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have the absolute best day of your life, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!